Okay, so once again, we've already mentioned it is 50 years this year since that first moon landing, and we've been running this series of presentations called Apollo at plus 50, with a different theme each month. And this month we're looking at things that have happened in Australia in contribution as part of the Moon Apollo program. So we have a monthly progress report on what's happening in the lead up to it. So for the purposes of this presentation tonight is April 1969. And once again, it'll culminate that meeting in July for the actual 50th anniversary, which is actually the day after the Moonwalk Day, 21st. So it'll be the 22nd of July. So we'll well and truly be spaced out by that meeting time. So the series, we've got upcoming special focus presentations, and one of them, or the next one, will be the Lunar Orbit Rendezvous Mission Mode Selection. That'll be in June. Next month, for people that don't know, is the 50th anniversary of the Apollo 10 mission, which was kind of the full dress rehearsal of the moon landing, so we'll be featuring that next month. But June, we'll be looking at that decision. And our investigative reporter Andrew Rennie has come up with some spectacular and interesting information. If you thought that Mission Impossible and those sorts of movies, James Bond, was interesting, you're going to love his presentation, because it's a lot of intrigue and mystery and machinations going on there from what we've heard. So tonight we're going to look at the Australian contributions to the Apollo program. I've mentioned before, Honeysuckle Creek, Tidbinbilla, Parkes, you might have seen Parkes in the film The Dish, Carnarvon over in Western Australia, various other facilities. So as normal, we'll go from 2019. I just took a picture of my car this afternoon. I wish. And we go back to 1969. I wish I had one of those. Would you love one of those right now? They'd be worth a fortune. I'm sad to say I remember exactly that car being released in exactly that colour, and I thought, oh, it was so... I had a look in the showroom, it's amazing. All right, I'll stop there. Okay, so basically what we do is a quick look at what was happening in the world. April the 1st, NASA engineer Max Faget showed the 20 colleagues a small balsa wood and wood model. Basically, he said this is going to be the next spacecraft we're going to build. It's going to launch like a spacecraft and it's going to land like a plane. Obviously, that went on to become the Space Shuttle. So that was 1969 in April. The Department of Defence, as you probably or may or may not know, the Vietnam War was raging back then, and so the US Department of Defence announced that the death toll for the American soldiers in Vietnam exceeded 32,629. Exceeded the 32,629 that died in the Korean War. So pretty awful. On a happier note, Dr. Denton Cooley implanted the first temporary artificial heart on the 4th of April 1969. It only ran for a little while, and they eventually transplanted a human heart into the patient. But the artificial one worked for a period of time. They didn't do another one of those until 81, which is quite interesting itself. Other things happening in the world, April 15, an unarmed American EC-121 reconnaissance aircraft was shot down by the North Koreans. This is fantastic. US President Nixon limited the response to adding armed escorts for the future spy planes flights and redeploying 4 aircraft carriers and other 7th Fleet ships to the Sea of Japan for 10 days. However, a book came out in 2000 by authors Anthony Summers, and basically he said that President Nixon was pretty drunk and decided he wanted to get plans for doing a nuclear attack. Apparently Henry Kissinger got on the phone to them and they agreed not to do anything until he'd sobered up. Fantastic. So I thought he's having... I don't know whether that's actually coffee in there or not. It's probably. Oh, it wouldn't happen. Yeah, right. All right, so what else is happening? The Martin Marietta X-24 was given its first unpowered re-entry and landing test, dropped from a B-52. 6 days after convicting Sirhan of first-degree murder for the assassination of Robert Kennedy, the jury pronounced the death penalty. He showed no emotion. Even Jesus Christ couldn't have saved me, he said. However, he was saved from execution 3 years later by the US Supreme Court. So that was Robert Kennedy. So it was a pretty nasty year, 68. And now we're in 69, the ramifications of it. April 30, once again, the number of US troops in South Vietnam reached 543,482. That's fascinating. More than 500,000 people in a nation of 19 million. Wow. And from May onward, they started to gradually decline. And Turi, I don't know how you pronounce that, of Norway became the world's first woman pilot to be hired by a major airline. Western airline. Bulgarian Balkan airline had also had pilots before that. And the Beatles, we have to find out what's happening with the Beatles. They were rarely seen in public, but they had a photo session. And then John Lennon, I didn't know this, changed his name from John Winston to John Yoko. John Oko? Yoko Ono. John, in honour of his new wife, Yoko Ono Lennon. Lennon told reporters, Yoko changed her name, so I've changed mine to give her 9 O's, which is good luck. All right. Top 10 back then, Obladia Bladar and While My Guitar Gently Weeps by the Beatles. You probably all remember some, well, that table down there would not remember any of this. These people here would probably got them in their record collection at home. Okay, so what was happening in the Apollo period at that time? April the 2nd, the Apollo 10 backup crew were out in the raft trying to get rescued. No, they were practicing getting out of the command module. April 3rd, the 2 lunar module astronauts, Cernan and Stafford, were doing training in their lunar module at KSC. So once again, they're going to be launching in May next month. Over at the Kennedy Space Center, Apollo 12 service module and command module were in the facilities there, while the Apollo 11 one, they can be seen up the back here. This is the Apollo 11 one here being moved over for its mating and stacking. So there's a lot going on there. Remember, they had to land the moon and they wanted to try and beat that or meet that target, so they had a lot of redundancy in if 11 doesn't work, 12. If 12 doesn't work, 13. 13 doesn't work, 14. So they actually planned to have 4 lunar landing missions in 69. The lunar module itself had its landing gear installed on April 4th. Then, this is all in the one day, April 4th, and they moved it over to a work stand before mating it to the spacecraft adapter. Actually, an interesting note here, you'll see that here that the Eagle still has its probes, see these landing probes. For people who are not familiar with that, what they do is when the legs open up and in space, these probes point down. The concept of that is as they come to the lunar surface, as soon as one of the probes touches the surface, it will shut the engine off, put a light on the dashboard, and they'll drop. But at the moment, there's one on each of the 4 pads, and we'll find out next month what happens with that. So keep a note. You have to come back and find out next month. And this is the Apollo 12 lunar module that arrived at Kennedy Space Center. That's the ascent stage here and the descent stage. And then it moved across from the altitude chamber, the lunar module, command service module, for mating over to the spacecraft adapter. So that's the adapter there that will be on top of the Saturn V. That was on the 13th of April. Then the whole thing, on the 14th of April, the next day, was erected on top of the Saturn V rocket. So you can see the legs of the lunar module hang down below there. And once again, Apollo 10 training. John Young was in the training centre, and that's their little icon for his command module, Charlie Brown. I like that picture, it's nice, isn't it? And once again, they were doing some training. Neil and Buzz were doing indoor training at the Cape, using the different equipment. This is how they got the rock boxes up to the lunar module cabin, and opening the scientific payload doors there. So they had to practice every step of the moonwalk of the EVA. Neil's raising the receiver transmitter mast of the deployable S-band antenna, which they didn't actually use on the Apollo 11, did they? They didn't decide they didn't need to, but they were getting good enough reception, I guess. So apparently it only weighed 1 kilogram, that whole thing, so it's pretty impressive. This was interesting. Neil and Buzz briefed NASA managers before a training session, which was described as a lunar timeline demo for Dr. Mueller, the NASA administrator for manned spaceflight. So basically this is all the senior management. Basically they're going to run through it for them as a sort of a show of what they've got planned and how they're going to do it. 7th to the 11th, the work on Apollo 10 continues. I won't have to read all of that, but basically they're doing lunar module stuff. They were running through stuff in mission control, running through mock programs and scenarios, etc. And once again, interesting stuff you find out that I didn't know. There was a bit of vehicle damage out on the pad 39B, which is where Apollo 10 was stacked. So they required some maintenance on the spacecraft, and one of the tanks was produced negative pressure, and the repressurization apparently it basically displaced the upper bulkhead, so there was some damage with the vehicle. So this was out on the pad, so getting pretty late in the piece, but fortunately it returned back, and it seemed they tested it out and seemed to be okay. So once again, a lot of stuff happening. And listen, this is just a fraction of all the things that are happening all across the country during this period of time in April. So so that's just a quick little helicopter view of what was happening in April in 1969. So next month, Apollo 10, if all goes well, these guys will be going off to the moon and conducting their Apollo landing rehearsal. So two of these guys actually ended up walking the moon, Gene Cernan and John Young. So this is our TV sets in 1969. You actually had to get up, for you down the back of the room, you had to get up and turn the knob to change the channel and then get back. And that's why we were so fit back then. These are our TV sets now, so back in 2019. So basically we'll see you next month at the May 27 meeting for the Apollo 10 mission overview. So